The parking lot was almost empty that night, the kind of silence where even a single footstep seemed too loud. David, the night manager, locked his office and started walking toward his car. That was when he noticed something unusual. An old sedan parked in the farthest corner, its headlights off, but a faint glow slipping through the windshield. He slowed down. At this hour, no one should still be here. The factory floor was already dark, and the cleaning crew had finished long ago, yet someone was clearly inside that car. At first he thought maybe it was just an employee with car trouble, or someone taking a quick rest before the long drive home. But as he moved closer, his gut told him something else. The flicker of light inside wasn't from a phone, it looked more like a small lamp. Then he saw a figure shift quickly in the front seat, as if they didn't want to be noticed. His pulse picked up. In all his years working here, he had seen plenty of strange things, but this felt different. He stopped at a distance, torn between leaving it alone and finding out the truth. One question pressed in, sharp and heavy. Why would someone be hiding in the dark long after the building had gone quiet? David pretended to fumble with his keys as he moved closer. From just a few steps away, he finally saw the person inside. It was Sarah, one of the night custodians. She worked quietly, never caused trouble, and most people barely noticed her as she went about her job. But tonight, she didn't look like the steady worker he was used to seeing. Her eyes widened the moment she spotted him. In a rush, she tugged at a blanket on the seat and pushed it down out of sight, forcing a nervous smile. "Just catching my breath before the drive home," she called out softly, her voice unsteady. David stopped beside his own car, unsure how to respond. He glanced back at hers and noticed the details. The fast food bags folded neatly on the passenger seat, a small pile of clothes stuffed into the corner, and a half-empty carton of milk resting in the cup holder. These weren't the signs of someone taking a short break. They looked more like pieces of a life tucked away where no one was supposed to see. Something in his chest tightened. He could tell she wanted him to leave it alone, to pretend he hadn't seen anything, but the image burned into his mind, and one thought refused to let go. Why would a hard-working woman like Sarah be sitting in her car, hiding under a blanket long after her shift had ended? David gave her a polite nod, the kind you offer when you don't want to press too hard, and walked toward his own car. Still, his thoughts wouldn't let it go. As he unlocked his door, he glanced back. Through the windshield, he saw her lower her head into her hands, her shoulders heavy, as if she was carrying more than one person should have to. That image followed him all the way home. He tried to convince himself he was imagining things, that maybe she was only tired. But the blanket, the food wrappers, the way she hid them so quickly, those details stayed sharp in his mind. The next night, when he crossed the lot again, the same old sedan was parked in the exact same corner. No engine running, no headlights, just a faint glow inside like before. This time David lingered longer, standing in the cold night air. His instincts told him this wasn't about someone napping before a long drive. It was something deeper, something Sarah clearly didn't want anyone to know. And he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever secret she was carrying, it was heavier than what she could hold on her own. The air had turned colder that night, sharp enough to sting David's face as he crossed the lot. And there it was again, the same sedan, parked in the same lonely corner, a soft glow flickering faintly inside. He slowed his pace, telling himself he was only checking for safety. But as he drew closer, a sound cut through the stillness. It was faint, almost easy to miss. A cough, muffled and small. David froze. He knew Sarah was in the car. He could see her silhouette in the driver's seat. But that cough, it didn't sound like hers. It was thinner, lighter, the kind that belonged to a child. His chest tightened. He stepped back quickly, worried she might notice him staring, and forced himself to keep walking. But as he slid into his own car, the sound replayed in his mind. It hadn't been his imagination. Sarah wasn't alone in that car. Someone else was in there with her. The following night, David didn't even bother pretending anymore. His steps carried him straight toward the far corner of the lot, where the sedan sat like it always did, silent and dimly lit. He edged closer than before, careful not to make a sound. Through the windshield, he caught a glimpse that made his breath catch. On the back seat, curled beneath a thin blanket, was a boy, small, no older than 7 or 8. His tiny frame was pressed against the door, his cheeks pale in the weak light. Beside him lay a worn backpack, the kind a child carries to school. David's chest tightened. The cough he had heard days earlier suddenly made sense. Sarah wasn't just staying in her car, she was raising her son in it. Just then, the driver's side door opened, and Sarah stepped out with a trash bag in her hand. When her eyes landed on David standing nearby, her face went white. For a heartbeat, she didn't move, frozen in place. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she pleaded, "Please, don't tell anyone." David's throat went dry as he looked at her. He lowered his voice, careful not to glance at the boy still curled under the blanket. "Sarah," he said quietly, "what's going on?" Her grip on the trash bag tightened until her knuckles turned white. For a second she looked like she might run, but then her shoulders dropped, the fight draining from her face. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered, though her voice broke on the words. "Or maybe it is. I don't have anywhere else to go." David didn't interrupt. He let the silence stretch, giving her room. She drew in a shaky breath. "It's been 3 weeks. We've been staying here at night. I work my whole shift, I finish every task, and when the building empties, I bring him back to the car. We sleep for a few hours before morning comes." David's chest tightened as he thought of the boy's small backpack, the thin blanket, the cough in the dark. "I know it's against the rules," Sarah went on. "I know I could lose my job if anyone finds out. But this is all I have left. Please, David, just give me time. I'll figure something out." Her words dissolved into a sob. She pressed her hand over her mouth, trying to keep the sound from spilling into the night. David stood silently, the cold biting at his skin, but all he felt was the heaviness of her words. Sarah stared down at the pavement, her voice low and uneven, like every word cost her strength. "My husband left last year," she said. "He cleaned out our account, left a note, and disappeared. Rent kept climbing, bills stacked up, and I couldn't hold it all on my own. I picked up extra hours, I tried everything. But when my landlord gave me that last notice, I knew it was over." Her hands trembled as she continued. "I thought about the shelters, but they're always full. And even if I got in, I was terrified someone would call child services. I couldn't let them take my boy. So this car, it became the only roof I could give him." David glanced at the back seat. The boy shifted in his sleep, clutching the backpack against his chest, as if it was his only safe place in the world. "I keep him in school," Sarah whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "I make sure he showers at the gym before class. I pack him something for breakfast, even if it's just crackers and fruit. He doesn't know how bad it really is. I can't let him. I just need to save enough for a deposit on a place, that's all. Just a little more time." Her voice cracked on the last words, and for a moment David couldn't trust himself to speak. David stayed quiet, the cold night pressing in around them. He had spent years making sure company rules were followed, years reminding his team that policies existed for a reason. And yet here was Sarah, breaking one of the clearest rules of all, sleeping on company property. By the book, it was grounds for immediate dismissal. But as his eyes shifted to the back seat, all he saw was the boy curled beneath that blanket, so small, so unaware of how close his world was to unravelling. The black and white lines of policy blurred into grey. "Sarah," David finally said, his voice low and steady, "I can't deny this is serious. If the wrong person sees you out here, they won't ask questions. They'll go straight to human resources, and your job will be gone." Sarah's face crumpled, but she nodded. I know the risks, but I don't have anywhere else to take him." David rubbed a hand across his jaw, his chest tightening. Memories surfaced, his own childhood, nights when his parents struggled to keep the heat on, how close his family had come to losing everything. He had given speeches about hard work and responsibility countless times, but standing here now, he realised Sarah was the very definition of both. He met her eyes again. "I'm not going to report you," he said firmly, "but you can't do this forever. It's too dangerous. We'll find another way." For the first time in weeks, something softened in Sarah's face. Relief flickered there, faint and fragile, as if she wanted to believe him but was still afraid to hope. The next evening, David tried to keep his routine normal, but his eyes drifted again and again toward the far end of the lot. The old sedan hadn't moved. Its presence was beginning to stand out, and not just to him. "Hey Dave," one of the security guards called as he walked up beside him. "You notice that car? Same spot every night. I'm starting to think someone's living out there." David's pulse jumped, but he kept his tone casual. "Probably just an employee with a long drive. Maybe they're resting before heading home." The guard frowned, unconvinced. "Maybe. Still doesn't sit right. I should write it up, just to be safe." David forced a steady breath. "Why don't you leave it with me for now? If it turns into a problem, I'll handle it." The guard gave him a curious look, then nodded slowly before walking off. When David glanced back at the sedan, he caught Sarah staring from the driver's seat, her face pale. She had heard every word. Her hand covered her mouth as if to hold in a cry, and then she slumped against the seat, looking utterly defeated. David walked over quietly and crouched by her window. "It's all right," he said softly. "But you need to be more careful. People are starting to notice." Her voice trembled as she whispered through the glass. "If they find out, I'll lose everything. Please, David, don't let that happen." He gave a small nod, but inside he knew the fragile secret was slipping out of their hands. That night, David couldn't shake the image of Sarah slumped in her seat, her son hidden under that thin blanket. He stayed in his office longer than usual, staring at paperwork without reading a word. Finally, on his way out, he stopped at a small corner store. He grabbed a few things: a carton of milk, a pack of granola bars, and a shiny red apple. Nothing fancy, but enough for a boy heading off to school in the morning. When he reached the lot, the sedan was dark, quiet, like it had been every night. David walked up slowly and placed the bag on the hood. He gave a light tap, just enough to be heard, then stepped back toward his own car. Through the windshield he saw movement. Sarah sat up quickly, eyes darting around until she spotted the bag. She looked toward David, their eyes meeting across the cold night air. Her hand pressed to her chest, and she mouthed a silent thank you. David gave a small nod before climbing into his own car. As he pulled away, he caught a final glimpse. Sarah passing the apple into the back seat, where a small hand reached out eagerly from under the blanket. That image stayed with him the whole drive home, warming something inside he hadn't felt in a long time. A few nights later, the fragile secret finally cracked. David was finishing paperwork in his office when his phone buzzed. It was one of the security guards. "Dave, you better come out here. We've got a situation." His stomach dropped. He hurried down the stairwell and out into the lot. The guard's flashlight cut across the far corner, and there was the old sedan again. Only this time, Sarah was standing outside of it, clutching her son's backpack, her face pale and desperate. The boy was awake, peering nervously from the back seat. The guard's voice was sharp. "Ma'am, you can't keep staying here. This is company property, not a shelter. It's against the rules and it's a liability." Sarah's hands shook as she tried to explain. "Please, we're not hurting anyone. I finish every shift. I don't miss a single task. We just needed somewhere safe at night. Please don't file a report." The guard turned to David. "I don't have a choice. I need to document this and send it to Human Resources." David's chest tightened. He looked at Sarah, her boy clutching the backpack to his chest, eyes wide with fear. Sarah's voice broke as she whispered, "If they fire me, I lose everything. Please, David, you promised." The words hit him like a weight. In that moment, he knew whatever he chose next would decide everything for them. The next morning, Sarah was called into the main office. David walked beside her, his gut heavy as though he were the one being summoned. In the conference room sat the manager from Human Resources, a director from corporate, and the head of security. The table between them felt like a wall. The manager from Human Resources began, her tone clipped but calm. "Sarah, we've received a report that you and your child have been sleeping in the company parking lot. Is this true?" Sarah's lips trembled. She tried to speak, but no words came. After a long pause, she nodded, her eyes locked on the table. The director leaned forward, his expression sharp. "You do realise this is a violation of company rules. It puts the company at risk. If something were to happen out there, we'd be responsible. That cannot continue." Sarah's voice broke as she finally found the words. "I never wanted this to affect anyone. I finish every shift, I do all my tasks, I stay out of sight. I didn't have anywhere else to go. My son needed a roof, even if it was only the car. I thought if I kept working hard, No one would notice until I could save enough to move. Tears slipped down her cheeks as the silence stretched on. David looked around the room, his chest burning. He knew if he stayed silent, Sarah would walk out of this building without a job, and her boy would have nowhere to sleep that night. He cleared his throat. "I need to say something." His voice was firm, louder than he intended. "If you let her go, you're not just enforcing a rule, you're putting a child on the street. Sarah is one of the most reliable workers we have. She has asked for nothing, and she's carried herself with dignity through circumstances most of us couldn't survive. And we're really going to punish that?" The room went still. The manager from Human Resources lowered her gaze. The director leaned back, silent now. Even the head of security shifted uncomfortably, as if the weight of David's words had settled on them too. The silence in the room stretched long enough to make Sarah's shoulders shake. She sat hunched in her chair, gripping her hands so tightly her knuckles were white. The boy's backpack sat by her feet, a quiet reminder of what was truly at stake. Finally, the manager from Human Resources let out a slow breath. "This isn't simple. The rules are clear. But so is her record. She's never missed a shift. Her work has been nothing but consistent." The director tapped his fingers against the table, his face unreadable. After a pause, he spoke more softly than before. "If this story ever reached the outside, the world wouldn't see a policy violation. They'd see a mother trying to protect her child. And they'd watch how we chose to respond." Sarah lifted her head, her eyes shining with both fear and disbelief. The head of security cleared his throat. "We've never had a case like this. Maybe it's time we think about more than what's written in the handbook." David leaned forward, his voice steady but full of weight. "She doesn't need pity. She needs a chance. Temporary housing, a little support until she can stand on her own. That's all she's asking for. We can do that, and we should." The room went quiet again. Then at last, the director nodded. "All right, Sarah, you'll keep your job, and the company will cover short-term housing for you and your son. Think of it as an investment in someone who has already proven her worth." Sarah's breath hitched. Her hand flew to her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. I don't even know how to thank you." David sat back, relief flooding through him. For the first time in weeks, hope finally had a place in this story. A week later, David found himself standing in the hallway of a modest apartment complex on the edge of town. The company had pushed the paperwork through quickly, and today Sarah and her son were being handed the keys to a small one-bedroom unit. Sarah unlocked the door slowly, almost afraid it might vanish if she blinked. The apartment was plain, the walls bare, the furniture second-hand, but it smelled faintly of fresh paint and possibility. Her son darted past her, sneakers squeaking against the floor. He ran from room to room until he reached the small bedroom. "Mom, look!" he shouted, his voice full of wonder. "There's a bed! I get my own bed!" He leapt onto the mattress, hugging the pillow as if it were a treasure. Sarah leaned against the doorway, her hand pressed to her heart. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from relief. David stayed a step back, letting them have the moment. He caught Sarah's gaze, and she mouthed a silent thank you, too overwhelmed to speak. He gave a small nod in return. As the evening sun spilled through the window, Sarah pulled her boy into her arms on the couch. For the first time in weeks, she looked like a mother who could finally breathe again. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to steady. Sarah still showed up to every shift, still worked with the same quiet pride, but there was a new lightness in the way she carried herself. The fear that once shadowed her face was gone. Her son started school each morning from a real home, not from the back seat of a car. He went in with clean clothes, a packed lunch, and a smile that hadn't been there before. For David, nothing looked the same at work anymore. Every time he walked the hallways, he noticed faces he used to pass without a thought. He wondered what hidden battles they might be carrying, what struggles sat behind their tired eyes. Rules had always mattered to him, but now he understood that rules alone didn't build trust or loyalty. What truly mattered was whether people felt seen, not just as employees but as human beings. One evening, as Sarah and her son left the building together, the boy spotted David across the lot. He waved, a library book tucked under his arm, his grin wide and easy. Sarah gave a small nod of gratitude, the kind that said more than words ever could. David watched them walk away, the weight of the past week still heavy but now softened by hope. He thought to himself that leadership wasn't only about enforcing every rule. Sometimes it was about stepping in when someone was at the edge and making sure they weren't left standing alone. And maybe that was how a company became more than a place to work. It became a place where people believed in second chances. This story reminds us that compassion can break through rules, and that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change a life, not only for the one receiving it, but also for the one who dares to give it. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. I'm truly grateful for your time. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to support the channel. I'll see you again soon, right here on Rain Inside.